But I spoke out forcefully against hatred, bigotry, and violence. In the media and the fake media, they make up stories. They have no sources in many cases. But Sheriff Joe can feel good. If we have to close down our government, we're building that wall. So I think we'll end up probably terminating NAFTA at some point. I don't believe that any president has accomplished as much as this president in the first 6 or 7 months. I really don't believe.
Just a sample there of the highlights of the speech. So for more, joining us now, Democratic strategist Caroline Heldman and CNN political commentators, Democratic strategist Dave Jacobson and Republican consultant John Thomas.
Also with us, Republican strategist Austin James, Cypress College political science professor Peter Matthews, and in Phoenix, CNN's Miguel Marquez. Miguel, if I can start with you, what's the situation like where you are right now?
Well, it's cleaned up. They're actually sweeping up, and some of that pepper spray and tear gas is starting to get to. If I start coughing uncontrollably, you'll know why. It's just being tossed up into the air. Phoenix police say that there were 4 arrests tonight. 3 of them were related to the protests. One of them was unrelated to it. There were 2 police officers who suffered some heat exhaustion as well. They portray this as an operation gone well. They say that there was tear gas thrown by protesters at police, but I can tell you that I was at the very point where it started, which was right down here where these barricades are. There were 2 water bottles thrown by protesters at the police. When they did that, without any warning, without any announcement, Phoenix police then fired off a single round of pepper spray, these little pepper bullets that they fire. That's when it set off the crowd, and that's when things got very, very intense here. They liberally use pepper spray, those little balls of pepper spray, tear gas, and the flashbang grenades, firing them over the heads of protesters to try to get them to disperse. It took a good hour and a half, 2 hours. Protesters had been here in 107-degree heat. What is that, about 42 degrees Celsius heat for much of the day. And they were loud, they were angry, for the most part peaceful. But when those 2 water bottles had been thrown, that's what set things off. They had thrown water bottles here and there throughout the day, taunting the Trump supporters as they walked into the convention center. But the police clearly had had enough just as the president was wrapping up and about to finish and about to leave the venue. That's when they moved in with great force against the protesters. Certainly not the picture that Phoenix want to present to the world tonight. They were treating this as a major event like the Super Bowl. They had all hands on deck, including the National Guard. This is something I think that the mayor and the police chief say that they will have an after-action report now. But it was clear that they moved in very, very quickly and with great force against protesters who were, for the most part, exercising their First Amendment rights of free speech.
Miguel Marquez there, joining us from Phoenix, Arizona. Miguel, we appreciate the reporting. Go get some water and wash that gas and that pepper spray out of your eyes. Thank you.
Miguel there, 11:04 in the evening, all of this wrapping up. Okay, so there was a lot to get to with this speech. It was a speech which started out relatively normally. The scripted part was a call for unity. Americans need to come together. And then came this broadside against the media, and, you know, it was off to the races. So I want to go to Peter first. What's going on here with this president? Because at times he seemed angry, agitated. There was some bizarre and, you know, some blatantly incorrect statements, which he kept making over and over again.
It's unbelievable. Actually, he's facing a crisis of legitimacy, as we call in political science and sociology. Legitimacy is the authority to use power because of rightness, because of being right in doing so. It means people acknowledge your power, your decision-making, and they trust you with what you're doing. But in this case, this president's been all over the place. He says one thing one day, the opposite the next day. And to actually come out with falsehoods when he says, for example, that he will make sure that the reform in Obamacare would include pre-existing conditions, and when he proposes it, it doesn't include it. So many contradictions, and people are wondering, can he even handle foreign policy with North Korea, for example, where he pushes the country to the brink rather than negotiating. There's a lot of question of legitimacy here, and it's just an example of his position of lack of legitimacy in the eyes of the majority of American voters, apparently, especially according to the polls right now.
John Thomas, to you, as a Republican, I mean, this was a speech which, you know, showed the president once again as someone who struggles to let things go. He brought up Charlottesville again, brought up all the statements that were made, and just seemed very, very angry. Is this the speech you expected from Donald Trump, on this night?
It was. I mean, this is classic Trump. I would call this the back to basics Trump, and I'm actually glad we saw this Trump tonight, because Trump was starting to drift. Tonight, he went back to the things that got him elected. Talk about, we're going to do whatever we need to do to build that wall. In fact, if it requires shutting down the government, that's how important it is to me to build that wall. He talked about jobs. He talked about immigration numbers being down. I mean, he was hitting all the points. Yes, he did talk about fake news and fake media, something that is
You're looking at me?
no, but I'm saying, this is a standard rallying point. I thought what we saw tonight was Trump at his best.
Whoa, Caroline.
I'm going to say that he looked unhinged. I think that Republicans, many of them, see Trump through what I call Trump goggles, where they're in a state of denial about how bad it is. I think he's lost legitimacy. I think he lost a lot of moral authority in the past week when he leveled Nazis with protesters, and he didn't help his case. He did not help his case this evening, right? He didn't talk about the people who lost their lives on the USS John McCain, but he went after John McCain, who's battling cancer, the fight of his life.
It's not fair to give somebody a pass, and John McCain's a hero, and I wish him a speedy recovery.
It's stupid
but he
politics.
hurt the Republican Party by the vote he cast.
But you don't.
Trump
But
let him off the hook for that.
Donald Trump looked like a child going after him. It's not smart politics to go after someone who's battling brain cancer.
Let me bring Austin James here as a JP strategist again. Was it smart politics? Was it smart to make this speech? To John's point, this was a speech that hit all the notes, but was this the time to make this particular speech?
Listen, I'll echo John. I think this was his greatest hits. I mean, he's playing what worked from the campaign. I think, listen, if John or I were maybe in his speech writing team, this maybe not the way we would have done it. But I think what you're seeing is that he's constantly keeping the media off kilter. Right? I mean, listen, I think his team probably wanted 3, 4, 5 more days of what he talked about yesterday, some of that good press coverage to be out there. Listen, what we're talking about on this desk right now is not what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago when I was here, which is the special counsel. And I think there is a method to his madness. And I think if you look at his polling numbers, you're not going to see a change in those who support him coming into this.
But I think the issue, right, is like the method to his madness is he's got an agenda that in a platform that he campaigned on, but he's failed time and again to deliver it. The reality is that the New York Times came out today earlier reporting that Donald Trump hasn't even had any conversations with Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Republican Senate, obviously, almost in a month. And the last conversation that they had, they were spewing, outrage at each other over the health care bill. The reality is Donald Trump hasn't been able to deliver for his constituents, and that's why you're seeing this erosion of his poll numbers, particularly in some of these key states, the Rust Belt states. NBC put out a poll yesterday, Michigan, Wisconsin, another state, and they had approval ratings around 35%. These are states that ultimately helped him propel to victory, and I think that's a big issue for him moving forward as we look to 2018.
You're one of the strangest moments. There were a lot of strange moments. You may think it was his greatest hits. There were some strange moments. This was when he went after the media. He went after the mainstream media, New York Times, Washington Post, CNN. And this is part of what he said. Take a look.
The live red lights, they're turning those suckers off fast out there. They're turning those lights off fast. Like CNN does not want its falling viewership to watch what I'm saying tonight, I can tell.
Austin, he was accusing us of not broadcasting his speech. And you know where I saw that? On CNN.
Yeah, it was wall to wall.
I mean, I mean, I'm sorry.
Okay, listen, I mean,
this is a little divorce from reality at the very least.
Sure, but I mean, it's one of those things where you can kind of put your finger in the air and see where the wind's blowing. Look at the people behind him. I mean, as soon as he drops these one-liners, the people erupted. I mean, he was playing to his crowd. He wasn't having an intellectual debate. And I think we need to be clear about that.
May I say something? The only problem is the people behind him represent 33% of the population, the voting population. His numbers have dropped tremendously from when he got elected. His approval rating is way down in all the polls. It doesn't matter if it's a poll that's sampling voters or sampling general public. So he's going, those people behind him may be his loyal supporters, but he cannot win re-election with them. That needs to become more legitimate with other people, with the rest of America, by reaching out to people and using some of the tradition and charisma and legality which most people who are legitimate actually rely on as leaders of the country.
Well, Peter, I want to stay with you because I want all of us to take a listen to something else the president had to say about the media, because he did go on about the media
a lot.
for well over 20 minutes, let's be clear, because he didn't just say the media, he didn't say we are just bad people. He took it a step further. Take a listen.
For the most part, honestly, these are really, really dishonest people, and they're bad people. And I really think they don't like our country. I really believe that.
Peter, the President of the United States saying the media doesn't like this country. He really does believe that. A free media is one of the pillars of American democracy. I mean, what's his end game here?
It is very dangerous because now he's vilifying the character of a major institution that's important for democracy as a mediating influence. And he's just calling them evil. He could use the word evil and saying they're bad people. You don't negotiate with bad people or with evil. And that is very dangerous. He's vilifying anyone who doesn't agree with him as being anti-American, and that is going back to not just McCarthyism, but perhaps worse even toward fascism or something like in what was going on in Germany before Hitler or when he came to power, as he was coming to power. It's something you have to really watch out for.
I know you want to respond to that. I just want to get this one response that we had from the former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, because a lot of people out there are now questioning this president's fitness for office. Clapper took it one step further.
Is he a threat to national security, the president?
Well, he certainly could be. Again, having some understanding of the levers that a president can exercise, I worry about, frankly, the access to nuclear codes. If he, in a fit of pique, he decides to do something about Kim Jong-un, there's actually very little to stop him.
Caroline, when James Clapper is worried about the president having access to the nuclear code, should we all be worried about the president having the access to the nuclear codes?
Yes, and I think many of us are. And I think it's time for the Republicans to step up and put their country before their party. It is time to look at what 40% of Americans want, which is impeachment. It is time to look at the possibility that his fitness might be compromised by mental health issues or cognitive issues. I mean, this is a man who couldn't find his limo coming off a plane. This is a man who didn't know where he was in the middle of a presser with Netanyahu. This is a man, anytime he's not on script, sounds like a rambling person, a rambling press conference, Kofefi. I mean, how much more do we need to question his fitness?
As much as I respect you, I don't think you have a medical degree, and I think it's absurd that the media plays into this by trying to diagnose his mental state.
You think this is normal?
Because you didn't agree with the words in a speech.
No. His actions aren't normal. His actions, he is unhinged in his speech. He doesn't know where his limo is.
I think
he doesn't know where he is.
What's not fair about Clapper's remarks, I think, is that we're coming off of last night, the Afghanistan speech, which I thought, as a Republican, he hit all the right notes.
Sure.
So,
well, Trump, though.
But so what? He signed off, and even Mattis said today that he had had a thorough review of the procedure, what we should do in Afghanistan. So all of a sudden, Clapper said, "Hey, I'm not trusting with the nuclear codes." But last night, he did a great job.
I mean, that is a fair statement.
You didn't like Trump at a rally? I mean,
well, he is dovetailing his campaign side with his presidential side, and I think that makes people uneasy, and it's very difficult to defend if I'm sitting on your side of the aisle. But I don't think that makes him necessarily unfit.
Last word today.
I don't think it takes an Einstein to know that this country right now needs healing. He's ripping us apart at our seams, and he came off as a repulsive, menacing, mad person. And the reality is we need a stable leader who can lead our country and move us forward. And the reality is when you have national security experts who are widely respected among Republicans and Democrats saying these kinds of things, that's very scary for our country.
Very quickly,
okay, let me talk about national security for just a minute, please. Yeah. Clapper's statement is very important because think of what he did with Kim Jong-un in the middle of this crisis where he keeps escalating and brinkmanship. For example, when Kim Jong-un said, we're not going to fire those 4 missiles at Guam, the president should have actually said, we're going to take a step also to back down a bit to give a confidence-building measure a chance to survive and work. That's how you negotiate. That's what I'm really concerned about, that Mr. Clapper's statement was absolutely correct that this president may not know how to negotiate, may not know the history of North Korea-U.S. relations, the fact that we've never signed a peace treaty with them. All of these things have to be brought, and this president does not have the details of history or diplomacy or the judgment sometimes to reciprocate and be able to keep things under control in a crisis.